So, Amazon.
Yeah, it's an interesting one actually. I've been doing a little bit of work indirectly with Amazon recently, and in a call, one of their team was talking about a decision-making process that they have implemented at Amazon. Not him personally, but that Amazon themselves implement. I can't remember the name of exactly what they call it, but it's something like the 6-pager. And the idea is basically that if you want to present an idea or a product or push something up that you think might be good for the business, that you write a maximum of 6 pages as a brief, which goes to the team, whoever you're presenting to, before the meeting, so they have a chance to read it. It can have some appendices of data and studies and stuff to back up your page. But the idea is that you don't swamp people with too much information, because people can write massive documents and spend months and months and months on them, and it becomes obvious as soon as you get into the meeting that it's just not viable for whatever reason. You've wasted time.
Yeah.
So the idea is that this process is quite quick, and then they allocate an hour to discuss whichever ones they decide to actually bring to the table. And so within that hour, the person bringing the proposal has 20 minutes to present it, and then there's 20 minutes to discuss the proposal, and then there's 20 minutes to decide on the proposal. And at the end of that process, at the end of that hour, the proposer gets a yes, a no, or a not yet, based on what's been said in the hour. And the idea is that if you're spending longer than that presenting and trying to make a decision, it's not ready.
To your peers.
Yeah. It's not ready yet, for whatever reason. Either you haven't formulated the idea or the proposal properly yet, maybe you haven't got enough information, maybe the business is just not quite in the right place at the moment, or the marketplace is not quite right at the moment. It's not necessarily because the idea is bad, but the idea overall is not to waste hours and hours and hours, or days or weeks, months, whatever, of people's time making decisions. Just listen, discuss, decide, move on. If you get a no, then you need to go back to the drawing board and maybe tweak your idea. If you get a not yet, doesn't mean that it's dead in the water. It just means that it's not the right time right now, and maybe there's more information that's needed, or the market needs to evolve a bit before they do that. But I just thought it was a really interesting process about how to move those decisions quite quickly through the business, and how to really focus in on what's important and not get waylaid talking about everything under the sun and all your justification and all the rest of it, to just get to the grit of the issue. Yeah. People's time's valuable, and your time's valuable.
So, because we've come across and have worked with business owners as clients, both in group and one-to-one situations, if you like, where I just can't imagine them being able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a desire to explain, justify, explore every element of the proposal whilst they're presenting it as an idea. And I think that's healthy. I do think that's healthy. But what you're talking about is that when essentially you're talking about a pitch for funding in an hour, aren't you?
Yeah.
So if you're going to take something, you're going to take a proposal to your business, whether you're the business owner presenting it to the rest of your board or to the other team members or your brother or wife or husband, whoever is in the business, you need to be able to really clearly and succinctly articulate exactly what the benefits of that idea are or is, how you're going to produce it, I suppose, what the basic need or desire will be for it in the market, and whether it's financially viable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you think about it, almost everybody has worked as an employee before they have their own business, right? Not everybody, but
I was a bad employee, but yes.
but almost everybody has, right?
Yeah.
Would you have gone to your boss, and I'm not talking about you specifically, but people listening as well, would you have gone to your boss or your management team and spent the whole day chatting about your idea or your product?
That's a waste of everybody's time, isn't it?
Exactly. So why do you do it in your own business? Because you can be indulgent. because it's you. You're the business owner. You can indulge yourself. But it's indulgent. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your staff's time.
And it's not just self-indulgent, is it? It's actually... It's I can't think of the word. It's sabotaging cost, productivity, efficiency, effectiveness within the business across the board. You're taking up your time, other people's times, their ideas. You get people excited about stuff, and then it never goes anywhere.
So here's the thing. The people who you're pitching to do not need to know the nth level of every thought that's crossed your mind to arrive at this proposal.
Because that's the self-justification bit, isn't it, as you're going
through.
Yeah,
it is. And also, if they decide to go forward with it, there's the time where all of those unknowns, those questions are bottomed out as part of the delivery process. You don't need... I think often business owners fall into this trap of trying to do everything all in one go. And we're actually talking about breaking a pitch, sales and delivery process down. So right now what we're talking about is how do you pitch that idea to your stakeholders, whether that is your customers, your wife, your employees, your business coach, whatever, other, peer group.
Yeah.
You're just pitching the idea. You're not trying to explain how the process works, what your marketing plan is, your pipeline or anything like that at the moment. Those are things to be decided once you decide, yes, this has got enough legs to develop and go forward. Right now, all you're saying is, I've had this idea for a product or service. Here's my outline plan of it. What do you think?
Yeah, this is the need as I see it. This is how we could deliver against that need. Yeah. So it's interesting that an organisation that vast can distill those opportunities down into an hour.
I think it's obvious though, because if you're that vast, you cannot spend the time that we see some small businesses taking over decisions.
Yeah.
They're it's like a glacier moving, they're massive. They have to make quite quick decisions. They also have a policy of not having any more than 6 in a team. Because if you get more than 6, it splits into another team. Because you can't know your individual team members well enough to really work effectively.
Yeah, there's a lot of research into leadership and management that talks about not managing more than 6 people for the same reason.
But how many small businesses do that? I can think of several small businesses which have teams, albeit possibly external contractors, but teams of people who are much larger than 6.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not suggesting that there's an obvious split there, but it's something to consider.
So I want to come back to this because I find it fascinating, and it's just as I've been listening to you, and I'm just trying to think it through. But this principle of finding a process to enable fast decision making, because we often talk about how do we put process in place to enable fast implementation. And actually, if you think about it, the implementation, the block for quicker implementation and getting results, and therefore the success that you want in your business, it isn't actually in the implementation. It's the decision making that goes on prior to that. Because I believe this is right, but the roots of the word decision, the Latin roots, come from 2 words, which is to sever. To sever. So it actually means when you make a decision, you sever off any other possibilities. It's to cut off or to sever other possibilities. You have decided to go in that direction or make that change, and everything else then becomes irrelevant because you've decided. And I think what's quite interesting here is that people I think people get bound up in their decision making around the principle of whether it's a good decision or a bad decision. And actually, I think the secret to making swifter decisions, I was going to say more decisive decisions, but you can't, to be more decisive, to cut off other possibilities quicker, is to just accept that no decision is a good decision or a bad decision.
It's just a decision.
It's just a decision. Now, some people might say, well, okay, a decision to stab somebody is a bad decision. You could argue it is. Well, it is. Okay.
We're not advocating violence here.
Don't do that. But the point is that the decision itself, at the time you make it, is just a decision. It's just society's values and the people around us and peer pressure, etc., and morals that make the decision a bad one. It's people's opinions.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get caught up with almost getting stuck in the process because they don't want to make the wrong decision. And
maybe that's a better way of looking at it. Rather than going there are good decisions or bad decisions, think about it in terms of right or wrong. There's no right or wrong decision. It's just a decision to make. Good and bad is probably the wrong way to go. Right or wrong.
Yeah, and I think so. They almost get stuck in. It's almost like a stutter, where they get stuck going. But what if this? What if that? And I need more information. I need to feel more secure. And I think the difference between those really small businesses and much bigger businesses like Amazon and Microsoft and big companies like that is they accept that some of the decisions they make are going to be wrong ones and they're going to fail. And that's okay, because out of that failure, out of those supposedly wrong decisions, they learn something. Yeah. And they take that learning and they feed that back into the process, so that the next time a similar sort of decision comes up, they can make a better decision.
So what you're advocating here is that, or what this advocates, probably a better way of putting it, is that you can spend a month making a decision, and it ends up being the right decision for your business, and the business moves on, and that's great. Or you can make 30 decisions, one a day, for a month, some of which turn out to be right and some of which don't turn out to be right. And some of those right or wrong decisions will be predicated by the decisions you make beforehand. But the speed at which you make those decisions gives you greater opportunities to have to make more decisions in the future. And that's how you drive the business forwards, by putting yourself in front of more decisions to make. Yeah. Because if you've got a decision to make, it means that something's happened, that action has taken place.
What if you looked at decision making as a learning opportunity rather than a decision?
Yeah, and I think people, we've talked about this before, and I think at a level people kind of understand that as in a logical kind of way. I'm always going to kind of look for an analogy that's sporting. And penalty taking is a great example. You've got to make a decision in a relatively short period of time. You don't have months, you don't have weeks. And people could say, okay, well, it's just a penalty in a game. But it could be the deciding penalty in a World Cup final, as we had last year. And you can choose to shoot left, you can choose to shoot right, you can go down the middle, you can go high, you can go low. There are fundamentally probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 8, maybe 9 places you could, make that. So you got 1 and 9. Now, the goalkeeper really is only going to be able to cover 1 of those 9. So 8 times out of 9, you're going to be right. If you happen to make the decision that the goalkeeper also makes, and the goalkeeper saves it, you've not made a wrong decision. At the time of making the decision, it was just a decision. You just picked a target area and shot and kicked the ball. Okay? It just so happens coincidentally that the goalkeeper decided to dive in that direction and got in the way of the ball. And sometimes they don't get in the way of the ball even though they make the right decision. Okay? So there's lots of factors here. But you can then be vilified, and I think this is where the challenge comes in, is a society will then vilify that player for making a mistake. Because inherently they understand that there were 8 other places that you could have kicked the ball. It doesn't matter. The fact is that footballers, for example, get paid to make those decisions, and most of the time they're right. Most of the time, not right. Most of the time, it turns out to be right. That's the point I'm making. And we're under so much societal and internal, intrinsic pressure to feel like every decision we have to make, every decision we make has to be right. And I think this fear of making the wrong decision, or the desire to constantly make right decisions, paralyzes us from making decisions at all. Yeah. And I kind of, just to extend that, so I'm sort of thinking this through as I'm saying it, but to extend that, I think the more decisions you make, the better you get at making them. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make more right decisions, but on balance, I would rather
just
make...
It's just a statistical probability.
Exactly. And I'd rather make 100 decisions in a year and 51 of them be right.
I think the other thing...
one decision
Yeah,
in a year.
The other thing you said that was interesting as well is you could spend a month making one decision or make a decision every day. And it made me think, is part of the problem that people are trying to wrap too much up into one decision, and actually it is 30 small decisions within that bigger decision. And actually by making smaller incremental decisions, it's less scary because it's not such a big thing. There's less weight attached to each individual decision. But out of those 30, let's say, 27 are good decisions, prove to be good decisions, and 3 aren't. Just taking that analogy, if those 30 decisions make up the one big decision for the month, you're 95% of the way there. Yeah. And in that month, those 3 that didn't work out, you can tweak and try again, and you'll get there. As opposed to this kind of almost stuttering stunt of, I can't make any progress, I can't make any decision until I've got all of this sorted out in my head. Actually make no progress. It wouldn't matter if 50% of the decisions that you made failed, because you're still 50% of the way further forward.
And that's an interesting point as well, because I wonder whether people make decisions and then extrapolate as far as they possibly can the end result that's going to come from having made that decision. Whereas actually the only result that comes from having made that decision is what decision you need to make next. Yeah.
Because it's going to change.
Because it is going to change.
It's like people trying to do 10-year planning. How could you possibly know you can have some ideas about the direction you want to go in. For me, that's as far as it would go. You cannot say, in 10 years, I want to ... and know that those things are going to happen. Yep. Because so much could happen in that period. Who could have predicted the pandemic? Nobody. Unless you're a fortune teller. But it happened, and you've got to be agile enough to change your product offering or your service, not ditching your whole business and starting a new one, but you've got to be flexible enough within that period. Doesn't mean that your business doesn't grow over the average of 10 years, but you're going to have ups and downs in it. Same with the stock market. Over the course of 10 years, statistically, you're likely to grow your investment.
Over and over and over again, yeah.
But if you take your money out every time there's a stock market drop, you're going to lose money. It's that panic over those decisions.
And I think you're right. And I think maybe it's the word that we choose to use, or that, history has given us. I said earlier that the word decision means to sever off completely, and maybe that connotation gets us thinking, oh, this choice that I've got is final,
and I can't go back.
I can't go back. Whereas actually, you asked earlier about whether there are learning opportunities. Maybe an alternative to that is, well, these 2 things, 3 things, 4 things that I have to choose between now are just the next step it's not a final decision. And I just wonder whether the word itself is a barrier. And if we turn that into, well, what's the next step?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got two options in front of you, pricing, for example, I've got to make a decision on pricing. Now, in my head, that's like, well, partly because I know the etymology of the word, that's it, my decision is. And we hear this all the time, don't we? My decision is final, even on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Yeah. It's kind of, is that your final decision?
Yeah.
Well, of course it's your final decision. The two words together are actually a contradiction, because you can't have a final decision. You can only have a decision because, of course, it's final, because you cut off from any other possibility. You don't get any more final than that. So it maybe, and there are probably things where that comes out in other contexts and scenarios as well, that's reinforcing this situation, maybe through schooling or all the rest of it as well, that when you have to choose between something, the inference is that's the last decision within that context. Well, it isn't. It's just a step. It's just another step that you're having to take. And then when you've made that step, if you don't like the outcome, well, take a different step. It's a bit like getting married, isn't it? Okay, we're both sitting here having been divorced, and we made a decision to get married, and inherently we're told, it's forever, isn't it? It's final. It's final, and till death do us part, and all the rest of it. I mean, that's about as final as you get. But both of us are no longer married to that person. Okay, so it wasn't
the same person.
No. By the way, and it wasn't each other either.
No,
strange. But
yeah, I mean, life
but
changes.
It wasn't final.
No, nothing's final really, apart from death.
That we know of. And it's not going. But I'm minded of that because we talked a few weeks ago about Jace, I think, moving down to Brighton, and she's been away for a week and has come back, and I've found a place, Dad. And there's a big part of me kind of going, blimey, she's moving to Brighton. That's it.
Yeah.
She's decided to move to Brighton, and they've got this little place, and it's a bit small, Dad, but it's fine. It's just the next step in her journey. And she actually said to me last night, she got back yesterday afternoon, you don't seem very exercised about this, Dad. And I said, well, you're 19, you're going to make hundreds of decisions, you're going to be faced with thousands of choices through your life. You're making a choice. For now, it's one of them. Is it final? Emotionally, I guess I've been, socially conditioned to believe that it is, but I'm having to kind of park that and go, it's with the information given to her right now, and her upbringing, her environment, and I've got a part to play in that as well, so I have to take responsibility for it. This is just a step she's taking. Doesn't mean she's going to be there forever. No, not at all.
And similarly, my son has decided that he is not going to go to uni this year. He didn't get the place at the application process. And when it got to clearing, he was going to go through clearing process and go to choose a place. And he got to the day and he went, no, I'm not doing this. Yeah. I'm going to take a year. He's looking at apprenticeships. And there's part of me that's like, but you're smart enough to go to university. Why would you not go? But then it's not a wrong thing. It doesn't mean that in a year's time he can't go, or 5 years or 10 years' time if he wants to go to university. It doesn't mean that university is the only route to the path that he wants to take in life either, but we're socially conditioned to go, you go to school, if you're smart enough you go to university, and then you get your job, and then you work for the rest of your life, and life's not like that.
And I think this is really important, because when you make a decision, or when you take that next step between a number of choices, you don't know how things would turn out if you'd made the other choice. And I think some of the fear is in that as well. So your fear is bound up a little, on his behalf, is bound up in, he's going to potentially have not necessarily a worse, but a different life than the one that he'd have if he did go to university. And I could say the same about Jace as well. But we don't know that.
No.
We
have zero proof that would be the case either. And actually, I look back to when I went to university, and if I knew then what I know now, first of all, I wouldn't have done the degree that I did, because it was a waste. It wasn't a waste of time. I got a good degree out of it, but I've never used anything from that degree. It only proved that I can study, which I already knew. I would have done a business degree. Second of all, I'm not 100% sure whether I would have actually gone to university. Having the benefit of the last 20, 30 years of experience, I'm not sure that university really has helped me much. But there's this societal expectation that if you're smart enough, you go to university, and that's just how it is. But actually, it's certainly not the only route anymore. You know, you've got apprenticeships and various other routes into jobs now anyway, which are much more heavily pushed than they were when I was at school. But even if you did none of those, it still doesn't preclude you from achieving the job, goal, career that you want to achieve.
And I think you're right, because actually the choices that we make, or the choices that we're presented with, and the decisions we make, or the steps we decide to take based on the choices put in front of us, we don't get to do both at the same time. No. So we don't know what, it's sliding doors, isn't it, fundamentally? Yeah. So I think you just make your choice, take the step, embrace where it is, and then make more choices, make more, you're presented with more choices, make more decisions, or take more steps. I'm going to start using that in my language, because it's better now what's the next step, not what do I have to decide.
I've certainly done that. I mean, I've done a number of different, very diverse jobs, employment, however you want to word it, and you would look at some of my work history and go, how did you jump from that to that?
Steps.
But at the end of the day, there are transitional skills, and there are commonalities within all of it, but on paper they look very different. But it was just a decision, a choice that I made at the time that was like, that seems like a good idea. It seems like it's something I want to explore almost. And when it stopped to being enjoyable and fun and financially beneficial, I stopped and went, okay, what's my next path? Yeah. And then, it happened to be that my next path was a very different path, and that's okay too.
Was it J.R.R. Tolkien? I'll try that again. J.R.R. Tolkien. So it's a dangerous thing stepping outside of your front door, because you don't know where the path is going to lead you. Something like that. So, if anyone's got any commentary, thoughts about decisions they've made that turned out to be right or wrong, I'm not going to use the good or bad, because I think that's very subjective. Yeah. But we will reinforce making a decision to stab somebody is probably not a good thing. It's probably the wrong decision, unless they're going to do something to you, and then maybe there's you see what I mean? That's where it gets complex.
Falling down the rabbit hole there.
Big rabbit hole there of value. So anyway, but as always, we'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, opinions on decision-making choices, or maybe we need a change of dictionary terms or terminology.
Yeah. Interesting.
Cool. See you next week.
Okay.